Greetings and welcome to another episode of the Veterans of Cedar Valley. My name is Tom Haggerty. I'll be your host for this show. In the previous shows, we've had interviews with veterans from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. And we've had other veterans with issues that we've discussed that were hopefully beneficial to veterans. Today in the studio, I'm happy to have with us 5 students from Columbus High School, and they just returned from a trip overseas to France and some other sites. And first off, welcome to the show, everybody. And I'd like to just start with Julia and have you go around and introduce yourself.
My name's Julia Benda.
I'm Caitlin Hine.
Eli Olmstead.
Joseph Sink. And Trey Mudd.
Great. Thanks for being here and taking time out of your busy school day. I know you're sorry to have to leave school, but we'll get you back as soon as possible. First off, I'll talk with like Eli, and we'll start with you. And tell me, what was the reason that you took a class called what, European?
AP, so Advanced Placement European History. I mainly took it because my dad has a history major teaching degree in history, and he just instantly got me into history when I was a kid. And once it went to freshman year with Mr. Cedar, that just confirmed how much interest I have in history, and it really got me hooked. And I've always loved learning about it. The History Channel is one of my favorite channels on TV, and I didn't know much about World War I before freshman year, but now knowing all the stuff I know, I feel more confident going into the decisions that I'm going to make as an adult, going into college. I feel more confident knowing that because I know the history and I know what I can learn upon.
Okay. And Caitlin, briefly, I want you to just display or tell me about the shirts that you all are wearing and what they mean, or there's a saying on the back. But go ahead and tell us about the shirts you guys got.
So the motto on the shirts is to honor, to learn, to experience, and to remember. I hope I got the order right. But that's just kind of our motto for the trip. We're not there just for a vacation. We're there to learn and have a deeper understanding of what went on, and to most importantly remember all the men that fought there.
And Julia, in advance of your trip, we'll get to your trip shortly, what did you have to study or read?
We read several books, starting with, I don't remember the name even of it, but it talked about a World War II Unbroken. It was called Unbroken. And then we read The Guns of August by Barbara Tuchman, as well as A Storm in Flanders and several other ones that really dove into the reality of World War I and World War II.
So Joe, when you went through the studying that you did at school, do you remember anything in your studies that when you got over to the battlefields and the cemeteries that you can recall from studying about?
Well, it really does come alive when you're there. One thing that was mentioned a lot in the books on World War I was the shell holes. And you can imagine it all you want, but you can't really understand it until you walk the fields and you see the holes, and it actually just, it comes alive for you.
And Trey, tell me, why did you want to go overseas on this trip?
Well, I really wanted to come over. I really wanted to go to Europe because of all the great stuff that we learned about, we were going to be able to experience. Mr. Schneiders talked to us multiple times about how in order to really understand what was going on in history is to be able to see that. And the ability to read it in the book and then actually go and see that it's amazing. It's not exactly what you think it is in the book. So.
And Eli, back to you. Did you have to raise money, or did you pay for this trip yourself, or?
It was, I think, mainly paid for on ourselves. We just had to do it on our own. I think we did get a little bit funding for food from the Booster Club at Columbus. In order to get that, I think we did concessions work for them, and kind of just got out. But not much fundraising. It was kind of just more of your, you pay, you can go, and if you pass, you can go.
Was it worth the trip?
Oh, it was definitely worth it. Like everyone said here, there's one thing reading it, the next is walking through it, and a lot of emotions came up out of everyone in our class, not just me, and able to bring my father with me as well.
And Caitlin, tell me from Waterloo, Iowa, how'd you get overseas?
So we started at Columbus, and we drove a bus to Minneapolis, and we flew out of there, and we had a direct flight to Paris. And so we left on a Monday, and our flight left at 4 in the afternoon from Minneapolis, and we got there at like 7 in the morning on a Tuesday in Paris. And then we went right straight into the learning. We drove all the way to Verdun and went to some shell holes and went on from there.
And Julia, how many students went and how many chaperones or teachers?
I believe 14 students and 15 chaperones, so a pretty big group.
Mm-hmm. And when you got to, where did you land at in France first or Belgium, or where'd you?
We started in Verdun, France.
Okay.
From the Paris airport, we went to Verdun, and then from Verdun, we went to Ypres, Belgium, I believe.
And who met you there, Joe? Did somebody that escorted you on the entire trip, or?
Yeah, our bus driver's name was Carl.
No, Tony.
Tony.
Tony was the bus driver.
Tony, I'm sorry, that's on me.
So he was the bus driver.
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry,
That's all right.
And he spoke very little English, but he was a pretty good guy.
Okay.
He kept with us the entire time.
And then, okay, Joe, back to you one more time. What was the first place or site that you went to visit?
It was a battlefield outside Verdun. I don't remember the name of it, but it was just up a hill, and you could just see everything for miles. There was a small memorial for all the men who died fighting there. It was.
And then Trey, was that battlefield now a cemetery, or was that someplace else?
It was a memorial. They had a memorial up for the men who died there, but the land was just covered in shell holes, and it was on top of a hill, so you could see just the destruction that the war created. But there was a memorial there for that.
And Eli, what was the first American cemetery that you guys got to go?
I think it was the Meuse Argonne, right? Yeah, Meuse Argonne, which is also the biggest American cemetery in Europe, I believe. And I mean, I used to work at a cemetery, so seeing how big of a cemetery that is unbelievable. Like, you kind of, if you ever seen like the back of our shirts, and I might be able to show, but it just shows crosses going on for days, and at first you think that's just a picture, but it really is what the Meuse Argonne looks like. It's just all these crosses, and it goes on, and you can't see where it ends. And it's
Caitlin, how many Americans were buried at this cemetery, you remember?
I believe around 300. We all put down around 20-ish flags, and 3 of us got the opportunity to put flowers down at the grave of 3 men from Waterloo, Iowa. So that was really cool.
Do you remember one of the names on the grave from Waterloo? That's all right.
I don't remember.
But at every cemetery that you went to, were you out to try to find a person from Iowa?
We also, besides visiting American cemeteries, we also visited cemeteries, British cemeteries, German cemeteries. So at all the American cemeteries, yes, we laid down flags and roses for the ones from Iowa, the men from Iowa.
And Joe, at the cemetery, did you trace anybody's name, like off of their cemetery stone or cross? Did you, like with a pencil on a piece of paper?
I did not. I don't remember if any of our group did, but we did something similar at Normandy. We put sand into the names so it'd shine. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yeah. And Trey, did you attempt to beautify any of the cemetery plots, like pick weeds, or were there weeds, put flowers down, clean it?
Surprisingly, the cemeteries were very well kept. What Joe said about the sanding of the crosses, that's the biggest thing we did for the graves. And when you took the rag and you put the sand in the initials or the names, it did shine like gold. It was beautiful. You could point out which ones we had done just by looking at all the graves.
And Eli, at each one of these battle sites, cemeteries, battlegrounds, were you allowed to do some ceremony, or did you just visit it?
It was at the Meuse Argonne, the Normandy, and the Menin Gate. We were able to do the last post ceremony, and that is just a ceremony that honors like the troops that at the last post during World War I was the trumpets play and the men could rest. And for the men that have died for the war, we did that last post for them, and it's a ceremony allowing them to essentially rest.
And Caitlin, at that ceremony, do they do that every day?
At the Menin Gate, they do. They have been doing it since World War I, where they do the exhortation and the wreath laying. And the only time they didn't do it was when the Nazis invaded Belgium. But ever since then, they do it every night. And every night, the Menin Gate is packed. And it's insane that people still continue to go out to remember all the men who had fought for them.
And Julia, it's packed with tourists or just groups or people from the town, or what?
I would say a mixture of everything. There's people who are tourists, and there are people who come every night and live there. It's incredible just to see the sheer amount of appreciation that these people have.
But they do it every night.
Every night.
Wow.
Without.
Joe, when you were allowed to do this ceremony, what did you do?
We started with the national anthem, and then we had a small traditional reading. I don't remember all of it off the top of my head, but it's something along the lines of "We will remember them." And then we finished with taps, which is often played at the funeral for soldiers. So it was.
Who played that? One of the students from the trip?
At the Meuse Argonne and at Normandy, the cemetery itself had it, but then we actually brought none of us can play the trumpet, so we brought a recording to play taps in the national anthem.
Trey, what day did you arrive at Normandy?
I believe it was a Wednesday, and I don't remember the particular date, but the first thing we did was we visited Gold Beach, and that was very special. We got to see the mulberries, or a harbor that was man-made, especially specifically for the invasion, and they still have the mulberries right there. You can see them, and it's awesome.
And Eli, he mentioned the what do you call it, mulberries?
Mulberries.
That's not a tree, right? But we've got a picture up on the screen now. Is it a dock or what?
It's a man-made dock. I mean, every dock's man-made, but it was, I think, built within a week. And there's two of them. There was for the American beaches and one for the British beaches. But they needed to be built within the week because Normandy obviously doesn't have a port. The ports were well defended by the Germans, and so they needed to get a port in there. So they design these mulberries that would go rise and fall with the tide, and so that we could supply the invasion after we got through the beach.
And Joe, did you get to go into a mulberry, or were they not a tourist attraction?
We did not get to. We got to go right up next to them, but we weren't going to be able to get on top. It was too high to climb, and there wasn't much on the inside for us to see.
We're going to take a short break now and come back and complete our show with the Columbus High students. Please come back.
Underage drinking comes at a cost. What gets crushed when you drink?
Welcome back to a second half of our episode, Veterans of the Cedar Valley. Today in the studio, we're visiting with 5 Columbus High students who have just returned from a trip overseas to France and some battle sites and cemeteries where our troops fought. Trey, right before the break, I was asking about some of the things. We'll get back to Normandy though, but I want to ask each one of you now to tell me what was the most interesting thing that you remember from this trip overseas.
Yes, the most interesting thing that I will always remember is going to the Meuse-Argonne territory. Mr. Schneers, before we were about to climb over this hill, said that you will never forget this. And when we got over the hill, there was this massive, massive sapping hole, like trench that was created by the explosions. And Eli had mentioned that this is like the Grand Canyon of Europe because of how massive the sapping holes were. And it was extraordinary. It was something I've never seen, so I will never forget that.
And Julia, same question.
For me, definitely the Omaha Beach Cemetery. Going up there, and I had a couple of people from Waterloo, Iowa, that I laid a rose down for, and doing that at their gravesite was just, it was incredible, you know.
Caitlin, same question. What did you remember most?
We mentioned earlier the last post at the Menin Gate, and I had the opportunity to give the exhortation there, and a lot of important people have done it before me, so it was just an amazing opportunity to be able to say the words and remember the people in front of all these people.
And Eli?
I'd have to say there are, I think, 3 memorials that we looked at, and they're all dedicated to the engineering corps that were on the beaches at Normandy, because I've always wanted to be an engineer, and just to see how impactful they were for the invasion of Normandy, it was really impactful to me.
And Joe?
One thing that always is going to stick out to me was there was a Canadian memorial called the Weeping Parents. And instead of focusing on the glory of war, it was actually on the grief that the families felt for those who were lost. And it was something that we hadn't seen anywhere else, so it kind of stuck out.
Wow. So all of you at least came back with an understanding of what soldiers went through on those sites, whether they were from the United States or from another country. I'd like to go back to the beach at Normandy, Trey. You guys were standing there playing with rocks. Mm-hmm. That's my term, but what did you do with the rocks on the beach at Normandy?
Well, we saw these great rocks that were sitting right back from the beach, and we spelled the words USA in the sand. And we did a pretty big USA, but as you can see there on the picture, it was really special to do that and to be able to show or to present the USA and having us in the background there. But yeah, it was awesome.
How long do you think the rocks stayed there?
Shortly after we left, the tide started to come in, so it started to wash up a little bit. But later, when up on top of the cemetery we could view down, I thought I had saw where we had put the rocks at, and I could sort of see USA.
Mm-hmm. And Julia, you also, I'll say you played in the sand and you wrote something in the sand. What was that?
Thank you.
Okay. And then I think the word we remember, was that in the sand too? Or is that, no, that's another, I'm sorry. But we remember, what does that mean to you when you put that there?
You know, I think it's something that that experience, being there, remembering all those who died and fought at these sites, it's just a small token of the way that we say that, you know, we're here to honor and to remember you. It's just how we did it.
Okay. And Caitlin, you guys went on a bike trip, I think. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I could do that, but tell me about the bike trip.
So we went on a 25-mile bike trip across Belgium, the countryside, with our tour guide, Carl. And we made multiple stops at different cemeteries, different battlefields. We got to look over the field where Passchendaele was, and we went to a few British and Belgium cemeteries, and it was amazing. The Belgian countryside is just beautiful, and our tour guide was so knowledgeable. Like, he told us so many things that no one would ever know about the cemeteries. Each cemetery is different in its own way, and it was just an amazing experience.
And Eli, how far did you guys ride on the bikes?
25 miles, and I mean, it was,
Out and back?
well, yeah.
All
Total.
together.
In total,
Total,
25
okay.
miles in total. It's not as hard as it seems. Flanders, like as we learned on the bike trail, it's really flat land.
Did that take you all day on the bike trip?
Yep, it was an all-day trip. I think we visited one more place at the end, which was what was that? It was another sapping hole. What was the significance of?
Hill 60.
Was it
Hill 60.
Okay, and while you were out there on the bike trip, Joe, I'm sure you became hungry, so did you guys stop at McDonald's or something?
Didn't see a McDonald's over there. We stopped at I don't remember the name of it, but it was just a pizza joint outside of Ypres. Excuse
So
me.
it was pizza.
Yeah,
It was good.
it was good pizza.
Yeah, it was good.
It was good.
Okay. And Trey, did you get to meet any of the people on your bike trip? I mean, the citizens of these towns or country?
I didn't get to meet anybody on the bike trip, but when we were in the Meuse Argonne Cemetery, there were two Frenchmen that came up to me when I was placing my my stakes down on the graves, and they asked what we were doing in French. I couldn't really understand them, but I feel like they were very grateful for what we were doing because we were remembering the soldiers there, and I think they thought that was really cool.
How did you answer them if you didn't understand?
We sort of used hand gestures,
Oh.
and so like that helped us a lot. And then Mr. Sneers came over and talked with us as well, but just
Good.
hand gestures.
Good. Julia, when you were inside of a cemetery, just pick one that you were in there, and as Trey was saying, you're laying your stakes or flowers down. Did anybody come up and ask you what you were doing there?
Not me personally, but I know several students who mentioned they had people come up to them and ask, what are you here for? What are you laying down? And we got to tell them, we're citizens from the United States, or we're students from America, and we're laying these flags down to honor the men who fought and died here.
And Caitlin, how many total Americans were buried in the cemeteries over there? Does anybody remember? I hate to hit you
I
with
couldn't
that
tell
number.
you. A
Just,
lot.
Take a guess or whatever, but did you visit any other cemeteries besides American ones?
Yes, we went to multiple French cemeteries. We went to a few British, and we also went to a few German, and it was really cool because each nation has their own kind of twist on the cemetery. Like, our cemeteries are the white crosses, and the Germans are a flat brown cross, and the British are a little white tomb. So it was really cool to see the differences between each one.
And Eli, the ceremony where you got to lay a wreath.
The last
inside-
one,
Yeah.
yes.
How did you get to do that?
Well, I think for the Meuse Argonne, that one was not the Meuse Argonne, the one at Normandy. Mr. Schneiders had to request it, I think, 40 days before, because since they have so many people request it, that you have to do it beforehand. And so he had to do that one, and then the one at the Somme Cemetery, there's relatively no one there, so we kind of just did our own version of that. And at the Meuse Argonne, he also asked beforehand. But so we asked beforehand, and we kind of give him our story, and I think that helps us get the ability to do that.
And Joe, did you get to go into any type of a bunker when you were over there?
Yeah, we went to quite a few. We went into some bunkers in Normandy, but I'd say the most impressive were in actually Verdun. We gotten to go into Fort Vaux and Fort Dumont, if I remember right. And those were just massive, massive structures.
And Trey, the purpose of going into that bunker was to do what? To help you understand what?
It was to help us understand what like the Germans would be seeing, or what they'd be viewing, especially in Normandy. We could look out from the observation deck in the bunker, and we could see the coastline where the American soldiers would be coming up, and that just gave us a perspective of what they were seeing, which was incredible.
Julia, inside that bunker, was there any notes or anything that anybody scratched, like Kilroy was here or anything like that? No,
I didn't notice any in particular.
because it was pretty dark.
It
wasn't
was pretty dark and cold,
Yeah.
but you could definitely see like there were some rooms that the men would gather in more than others. More lived in, I guess, look to them.
And Caitlin, while you were walking around, did you get to go into some woods at all and look for stuff that was left over from the battle?
Yeah, in Verdun, in World War I, it was a lot of trench warfare, and they were more in the woods, so there was trenches just like along the woods and the trees, and you have to go down into them, and you could still find barbed wire from World War I. We were able to take some home, and there's just a ton of like metal everywhere from World War I, and it's crazy that it's still there.
Did you pick any of it up?
Yeah, we brought wire cutters, and we each got to take a little piece of barbed wire from World War I home.
When you went through customs, did they ask you what the wire was or the wire cutters were?
Surprisingly not.
Okay. Eli, I'm going to start with you and ask you point blank, would you go back to tour again?
I would definitely go back to tour again. To do the same trip, I would not want to do the same trip. I'd want to visit more of the other stuff that we didn't get to see. There's I would say leaving France and Belgium left me with more questions than I would say answers.
And Joe, did you, when you got back here, did it all click as to why you studied it and what went on over there?
It did really make sense. I thought I understood before we left, but it's when I got back and looked back on what I had learned throughout the year and then the trip itself, it kind of just all fit together pretty well.
And Trey, you would encourage other students to do the same thing that you guys went through?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Will there be another trip, Julia?
I sure hope so.
How many trips has this been, do you know, Caitlin?
I believe this is the 13th one.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Mr. Schneiders has gone on each one of them?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you guys for being here today. It was very interesting to listen to your memories of the trip, and that we're very proud of you as veterans who get to watch this show, knowing that there are students in school who are still studying about what veterans went through during World War I, II, Korea, and everything, and that we appreciate you being here. Thank you for joining us today on another session of Veterans of the Cedar Valley. We'd like to invite you to come back, and we welcome you to tune back in for another show. Thank you.